Hey there, my name is Liz, and if we haven't met each other before, I'm just here sharing my weekly life lessons. I'm just doing a bit of a series on weekly life lessons that I thought I would share with you, sort of in like a conversation kind of format. I sort of, like many people, I do these, I make sure that at least once a week I sit down with myself and I do a bit of a journal, at least just sit with myself while I'm having my morning coffee and just have a bit of a think about like what have I learned this week. I think we're learning and changing all the time for those of us who are really growth mindset people. And I thought, as often as I can, I'll record those experiences of those weekly life lessons that I have to share with you, just to spark some conversation. Because I always love hearing about other people's life lessons as well. If we share those experiences, we all grow together. So that's sort of the spirit of this video series. So today I want to talk about this concept of reclaiming experiences. What does that mean to me? And why do I think it's so important? So just last weekend, I decided to. I've done this a few times now where I've reclaimed an experience, but last weekend was a particularly big one. So the way that it all happened was about 2 weeks ago. I don't use Facebook very much anymore, but it was like one of the like I just use it because I'm a part of like different like interest groups and things like that, running groups, camping groups, that sort of thing, where you get lots of information and connection from those groups. So I'm still on Facebook because of that, but I don't really like post on there or anything. But Facebook has that lovely feature that it does the whole Facebook memories thing. And isn't it funny of like, it's usually like just the most traumatic moments of your life that Facebook's like, hey, you forgot about this. Like, what about this deeply triggering thing that happened? And Facebook did that for me 2 weeks ago. It ended up being a good story though, which I'll unpack with you. But yeah, it was this situation that happened 5 years ago when I went on this trip with a good friend to this beautiful tropical area where I live. So it was a little weekend road trip with lots of driving involved, but the drive was like well worth it for how spectacular this place is. If you've never seen it before, it's the Whitsundays in Queensland. It's like just this tropical paradise. It's really beautiful. So I went to this place called Whitehaven Beach. It's this stunning place where the sand is made of like silica, like 90 something percent silica, which is this cool white sand. It's pretty incredible. I'll share some photos on the screen there so you can sort of get a bit of an idea of what this place is like. So it's obviously a spectacular place, but that trip, it was the best of times and the worst of times, as they say. It was an amazing trip because so 5 years ago, so that was what, 2019, I was still married at the time in a really toxic relationship, and my health was in a really bad place. Essentially, I had some pretty serious chronic health issues at the time. I had some really poor mental health issues at the time. I had a chronic fatigue and pain condition at that time. And although at that point I'd started to try to turn things around a little bit with my health, it was still very, very challenging. And what that trip did for me in a really positive way was it was sort of my first taste of adventure really in a long time, and I'm really grateful to that friend for exposing me to that. So it was really felt quite liberating to get in a car with her because she like organized the whole thing and I just tagged along, because I myself at that time didn't have the independence to book things myself. And it's just hard when you're in an unhappy marriage where like I wanted to do things, but he wasn't really up for that. Like he just wasn't really an adventurous person. And I think over the years of that relationship, you sort of, and it's just, and this is on me for being codependent, but you kind of just blend into the person that you're with. So I just decided I wasn't adventurous either. But when this friend offered to take me on this trip, I jumped at it because deep down, I think that was like, it kind of like planted the seeds of who the real version of me is I do love going on spontaneous adventurous trips over the weekend. That is so much of who I am. And I'm grateful for her because she helped sort of light that for me. So it felt really liberating to just pack up my bags and just gallivant away for the weekend and get on the road, because I'd previously not had the best experiences with road trips. Like my ex and I would always like fight and it was always like stressful. And It was usually just road trips to go and see his family. Like we didn't really go to any adventurous spots. There was always just a purpose for it, not for adventure's sake. It was not just to have a fun time. It was always with purpose. So it rebuilt my relationship with road trips. I didn't find it as fatiguing as I usually would. And it was just really exciting to get away for a bit and be by myself. Like, not by myself, I was with my friend, but be who am I outside of this relationship, you know? It just sort of started to plant the seeds for that. The reason why it was one of the worst times at the same time was, as I said, I'd already sort of started to make some headway in my health. I'd started getting therapy again. I've had therapy throughout my adult life, but I'd recently at that time sort of started to reinvest in therapy after several years of being away from it, to really start trying to sort myself out. My anxiety was really, really poor. My depression was very, very bad, like dangerously bad at that time. And so I was constantly triggered. I was having panic attacks. I was having a really rough time. So I was starting to try to fix things. I was also trying to use food a bit less as a coping mechanism. I was trying to get on top of my eating habits and just add a little bit more nutrition. It wasn't like the intention was weight loss at the time, but I look back on that now and it's like it wasn't about weight loss. It should never be about weight loss. It should just be about putting nutrition into your body and taking good care of your body and starting to use healthier coping mechanisms instead of food. So I was starting to get on top of that a little bit. I was starting to be a little bit physically active. I mentioned a previous video how weight training like changed my life. Not to the extent that I can do it now, but I was trying. I was in the gym at least once or twice a week and I was trying, you know. But this trip kind of helped me see how much further I still had to go and how much my physical and mental health really had taken a toll on my body. So when I was at that island, there's like a couple of like sand dunes, you know, that you climb. They're not particularly steep. And as I recently experienced, they certainly weren't that steep for me now, but at that time they may as well have been a mountain. I found them so hard. Like I found even just walking in the sand so difficult. Like I was just so fatigued. And I was a physically larger person at the time. I was about 40 kilos heavier. Or no, I'd lost a little bit of weight at that point, at least like 35 kilos. So translating roughly to pounds, I think it's like 70 pounds heavier than I am now. And so it was just physically harder to do some of those physical tasks. There was like a lookout that you had to climb a bunch of stairs. I found that so exhausting to do that. And I felt so defeated, you know, because I'd already worked really hard. And I look back on myself now with no shame whatsoever, only love of just like, I was trying so hard to get my health back on track in an abusive relationship, you know, so deeply unhappy, and I was trying. But in that moment when I was on that island, I just felt so defeated of just like, you know, I've you know, again, it was all about weight at the time, but it's just like I was so hyper focused on weight, but it's about wellness. It's not about weight. It doesn't matter how much I weighed. None of that matters. And but I couldn't see that at that point. I was just like, oh, what was the point? Like, this is still so hard. This is all still so terrible. I couldn't focus on how much I'd achieved. I only focused on how much more I had to go. I was also just deeply self-conscious. Like, and this was just all in my head, but I was just comparing myself to everybody else that was there. So we got on this like beautiful little sailboat. It was like this like touristy little sailboat where you get on the boat, you sail out to this island for the day, and you spend the day there, go snorkeling, and then you sail back. So it's like an all-day thing. And I just kept comparing myself to everybody else that was there, like these fabulous, like healthy, or what I pictured in my mind of what was healthy. They were just slimmer than me. Who knows if they were actually healthier than me, but they were aesthetically like better than me in these ways. And so I was comparing myself to that. I felt like just like ugly. And the other thing was like at that point in my life, like finances were really tough at the time. That was another issue in our relationship, is that finances weren't being managed very well, not being managed particularly well by me, but particularly not being well managed by him. And it meant that I didn't have any like clothes to be able to take on this trip that were like suitable. So I didn't have a nice sundress like some of the other people that were there. I had not literally bought myself any swimming clothes for years. So instead of swimming clothes, I just wore dark colored underwear and a crop top. And literally the morning that I got into that crop top, because it was so old, because it had been so long since I'd bought myself anything, not even secondhand, the strap on it broke, you know, and I had to like kind of like fasten it to like keep it, but it was like looser on that side compared to the other side. So it's just like I felt so much shame about that as well. And the dress that I was wearing was just a hand me down from my mother-in-law. So I just didn't feel pretty and nice and glamorous like everybody else there. And none of those things really matter, but it just mattered at that time. And honestly, it's like you deserve to wear swimming clothes that actually fit you. It doesn't matter if it's secondhand or not, but just, like it was just so symbolic of how that moment was going for me at that time and how my life was going. Anyway, so it was triggering in a variety of different ways, right? And then, after that trip had finished, like there were still moments that were beautiful in that day, like when my friend and I was sitting at the front of the boat, just feeling the wind in my hair. I'd for momentarily forgotten about my insecurities for just a moment, and it was just felt so good to just not be so anxious and so unhappy for just a moment. It was just a few minutes, but it was something. And I thought, oh, that felt so good. I came back from that trip and I look back on the photos that we'd taken together, and I just was just drenched in so much shame. It was just so hard, what those photos symbolized. Anyway, so that's what the photos were that Facebook brought back up for me. And in that moment 2 weeks ago, I was like, I think it's time to reclaim that moment for myself. So my interpretation of reclaiming is where you've had an experience somewhere and you decide to go back to that place months, years later to reclaim it, because you yourself are in a different place when you revisit that place. And I decided it'd been 5 years. My life's changed a lot since that time. All of those physical ailments that I described before. So I had lots of I had a condition called fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed in, I think it was 2018, where it's like just chronic pain and chronic fatigue, constant like muscle aches, joint aches, very bad fatigue where I was like falling asleep at my desk. I needed to be medicated just to be able to function throughout the day. Significant anxiety and depression. I had insomnia. I had gastrointestinal issues. I had what else was going on? I had skin issues. Like, it was just, my body was just so inflamed and so unhappy. I had really high inflammatory markers in my blood tests. So there was so much going on. And essentially I'm at a point in my life where I don't have any of those symptoms anymore. It seems like a miracle, but it's and maybe I'll go into this in a different video, but I've made a lot of changes in my life. I left that relationship. I went through a divorce, ended up in a lot of debt as a result of that divorce, but it was still worth it. I changed my diet. I was able to heal a lot of my trauma. I don't have an unhealthy relationship with food anymore. I can exercise now. I'm training for a marathon. So much has changed in my life since that moment 5 years ago that I decided that now was the time to go and do it. I felt a little bit of challenge in myself of is it worth spending the money right now? I don't know if I should be doing that because I'm saving up for something really big at the moment, trying to get on top of my debt. But it just felt like, and this was that moment of following my intuition of just, I felt compelled to do something about this. I felt compelled to do it. It also was well timed because we had a public holiday here in Australia. And so I was able to take an extra day off work, and that meant I had 4 days off. And I just took the plunge and did it. So I went back to that place last weekend and I booked the same sailboat. I wanted to go back to that very same boat, that very same island, and relive that experience and reclaim it for myself. Turns out a week later, the boat was decommissioned. So I actually couldn't go back on that boat. They ended up calling me and telling me that the boat had been cancelled. So I was transferred to a different sailboat. And I felt like that was kind of interesting too, because when I'd gone to that original trip, I'd seen this other boat there. It was this larger catamaran there, and it was larger and it had more people on it. It was this seemed like a really fun vibe, whereas the little sailboat was only less than 20 people on that boat, I think, whereas this one was 70 people on this catamaran, this big purple catamaran. I was like, oh, that looks really cool. I'd really like to go on that one day. Well, it turns out that's the boat that I ended up going on this time around. And to be able to relive that experience again in a completely different place was pretty huge. On the day, it didn't feel as monumental. I just wanted to just be there and be present. And it was pretty significant. So just being on that boat again, I was there by myself this time. So that was symbolic in itself. I didn't need anybody else to be there. I could just be there by myself, and that was enough. I made a new friend while I was there, this lovely woman. And we hung out like on and off throughout the whole day, you know, took photos of each other, and it was just really fun. I was able to climb those sand dunes like they were nothing, you know. I went out to the lookout, and the steps were easy. I was like in the front of the group climbing up this hill like it was just no problems at all. Most importantly, I spent the whole day not a self-conscious thought in my mind. You know, I didn't think about my body at all that whole day. I was just there with me and just experiencing this, and just that those few brief moments of the wind in my hair 5 years ago, it was that feeling. But the whole day I got to experience that, and there was something just so, it was so liberating, but it was such a special moment to share with my past self. It was almost like, I don't know, it's kind of eerie, and I get a bit emotional when thinking about it now, but it was almost like I was with her that whole day, and I just thought about my past self the whole time that I was there, well, on and off throughout the whole day, with only love. Like I was able to look back on my past self. It's really getting me going. Oh, I had to have a little time. I was getting a bit emotional. Still getting emotional when I think about it. But it was this really special moment to like look back on my past self and just be so grateful for her. Like with much kinder eyes, I was able to look back on that situation and just be so proud of my past self, of everything that she was fighting to be at that point. Like she was fighting battles that she wasn't even really aware of at the time, to be me, to become this version of me, the real version of me that she was able to uncover over the last 5 years. So it was this moment of respect, and it was this moment of like hope that so much can change, you know. And it's only being there and reliving that experience that I really realized that, realized how much things can change and how far I have come, and how much my past self fought for me. I did a little Instagram video about that experience. It was I'll include the link to that video if you just want to. It sort of talks about my story a little bit, unpacks, you know, largely what I've been talking about, but it's got the video footage along with it and things like that. So if that's something of interest to you, I'll include that down below so you can sort of see the video version of me reclaiming that moment. I made that video and then I sobbed for a good 20 minutes after I made that little Instagram clip. So I did that on the Sunday afternoon, like the afternoon that I'd gotten home from that experience. And I just sobbed, happy tears, but it was just, yeah, it was a pretty significant moment. And then I told my best friend about it, and then she sobbed as well. It was just really significant. It's hard for me to put into words why that really mattered. And that's why I include the little Instagram video too, because I think that'll help sort of capture a bit more of what I'm talking about here. But all that to say, that's why I think reclaiming experiences is so important. That it does just help remind you of how far you've come, because we're always so hard on ourselves. We have actually come a really long way, and it's a way to be so loving and gentle to our past selves, when in the past we weren't able to be so loving and kind to our versions of ourselves that were there at the time. So yeah, that's my story about reclaiming an important experience, and I hope that provides some encouragement for you. If it's large or small, like reclaiming experiences, even if you don't exactly go back to the exact same place, but it's like re-experiencing that as closely as you can, and just reflecting on that, I think is really important. And I think whatever money you have to spend to do that, if it, you know, and I didn't have to spend heaps of money. I stayed at a caravan park. I was camping to like keep accommodation costs low, but it was really important. And I hope that you can see that, yeah, it's worth the investment to do that for yourself as well. I hope that's been helpful. I'd love to hear in the comments what experiences you have reclaimed for yourself, and what type of experiences you would like to reclaim for yourself in the future. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you soon.